And there we are. Hi, everyone. It's Sarithkin from Montier, and I'm here with the Murder of Dukes interviews with Duke Ibrahim of Artemisia, who also reigned in the Outlands. So welcome, Your Grace.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So I usually start these with your origin story. So if you can tell us, where, when, how you found the STA, that would be great.
So I guess, let's see, I was in high school when I first found out about the SCA from my brother, Dahoud, Count Dahoud, if anybody knows him. And he had just gotten back from Alaska, and I was still trying to finish up high school. And he made me a promise that if I finished high school, he would make me a suit of armor. So I did, and I got my suit of armor, and I basically got pulled in from him almost entirely. Yeah, that was I got my first fighting authorization on my birthday at my 18th year, and that was my first tournament that I fought in.
And
I just fought in my illusion helmet.
Did you start in Artemisia?
I did, yeah, here in Missoula, Montana. Artemisia is the Barony of Sentinels Keep.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did your brother find it in Alaska?
He found it actually in high school. He actually built a suit of armor in high school in shop class. And he got pulled in at a MizCon, game convention, and he saw the demo and started figuring it out, and then went to Estrella the next year, and that was when he was in high school. And then he went to Alaska with a bunch of friends from the SCA.
Okay.
They had kind of like a mini group up there on the boats, which sounded like a lot of fun. And
it does.
They came back and all lived together. Yeah, they got this duplex nest together. There was 4 of them. Let's see, Sir Ian, my brother, and then they were all, nobodies at the time. Raven, who's a different Raven from the one you guys probably know. And I can't remember who else was there, but anyways. And they would hold fighter practices in their backyard. They took the fence down between the duplex. They built an armory in the garage, and that's where we built our armor from. And so basically he built me a whole suit of armor minus the helmet. Got the helmet from Illusion for like $100. It was dirt cheap. Then started fighting in his backyard. I think we counted the times we fought from that first year I started fighting in 95 to 96. And I fought on average every other day.
Wow.
I think for a 2-year period.
Wow. So did your brother teach you how to fight?
He kind of. He more of a, he basically put a sword and shield in my hand. And he said, "This is what you need to fight with." And I was like, "But I want an axe." And he's like, "Nope, you get a sword and shield. Once you start beating people with this, then you can upgrade to the axe." So, and he was a glaive fighter primarily, spear fighter in war, and greatsword fighter in tournament. And he made me fight sword and board, and so I got good at sword and board so I could do the other stuff.
And when you say axe, did you like one-handed axe or two-handed axe? Like what was the thing that you really wanted to do?
So I first saw an axeman at one of the events I went to. I think it was a border raid. And he was out there in a melee with a single axe. It was about a 39, maybe 40-inch axe. So using it one hand, pulling out a dagger on occasion, and a butt spike on the axe. And it would look like so much fun. So I had to try it. And so I did, and I fell in love with it. That was the first style I really fell in love with, was the single axe.
When he gave you a shield, was it a heater or strapped, or was it center mounted?
Yeah. Big strapped-on heater. That's what everybody was fighting with in Artemisia at the time. So he basically threw me at a bunch of people. He's like, "Here, go fight this guy, go fight that guy, learn from them." And so I just went out and soaked it all up like a sponge.
Very cool. So when you were fighting every other day, was that like everybody that was living together fighting together, or did you guys have that many practices?
So we would practice twice a week in town. I think we were doing Tuesdays and Thursdays or Mondays and Thursdays. Can't quite remember at the time. Mondays, I think, was an armoring day and then fighting as well. So it was kind of like a multi-purpose day. And then Thursdays was just for fighting. And then on Sundays, if there wasn't, well, that was the other thing. We were in the restaurant industry, so we didn't get Fridays and Saturdays off. So we would always go to an event on Sunday morning and then have a big practice the next day. And we started a household that same year, 95, Brotherhood of the Black Unicorn, if you've ever heard of them. And we started going to a different practice in Montana, like 3 out of 4 weekends a month. And so we would, load up the 15-passenger van, put everybody in there, 9 people with armor, and drive to a different town and then do a practice. And so we were doing about 3 times a week on average, and then events. When we get the occasional one, like the border raids or the what do they call it, uprising, Estrellas, all that kind of fun stuff. Estrella, of course, you fill everything in 1 week, but.
So when you say that you would go to the event on Sunday and then you'd get a big practice on Monday, would you guys stay in the area and do a out of area for you practice?
We would do everything on Sunday. Everything on Sunday. We would drive, get up early Sunday, drive to the thing, usually get fighting by 11 or so, and then by about 4, we'd pack up and go home. So get our fix in, and then, and usually at that time, it was all about fighting in the melees, and that's why we were doing it. And we had a melee unit, and we'd go to the thing, and we'd get our 10-on-10s and small unit tactics, stuff like that.
So what attracted you to the melee fighting?
The intensity of it, and kind of the camaraderie that you build on the field with the other people. After a few times of going over to Ontier and Avacol, they become your closest friends on the other side of the field that you're trying to gun down. And that type of camaraderie, I don't feel you get on the tournament field as much. I think that's the one thing I miss about the tournaments. And it's I'm not saying I don't like tournaments. I love tournaments. They have their own appeal and their own aspects of camaraderie, but it's different. I think everybody would agree with me on that.
Well, yeah, definitely. Missoula is sort of uniquely situated so that you can play pretty easily with Eastern Ontier and Southern Avacol. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So when did you decide that you also liked tourney fighting, or was it always both, but you just liked melee more?
It was always both, but I can tell you when I liked tourney fighting. It was my very, very first event. That's what drew me in. My very first event was an infamous crown tournament held in Artemisia in Missoula. I think it was 93, 94. I think Trelon was king. If somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what they called the 2-for-1 crown. We fought through the list, and there were 2 people in the final round, and they didn't want to take each other's shots, and so Trelon stopped the fight twice, pulled them both aside twice, talked to him twice, and then finally, halfway through the bout, he came up and he says, "You're both banished. We're fighting this thing over from the beginning."
Wow.
And I was like, that is so cool. It was so epic, like dun dun dun. The guys were pissed, throwing their gauntlets, and it was just like this kind of this energy that just kind of shifted, and everybody got really excited about it all of a sudden. I loved that energy, and a lot of people think of it in infamy, but that drew me in, that drama.
That's kind of a cool introduction, because it doesn't happen very often. I'm sure you know that now. You probably didn't know that then, because it takes a lot of strength in the king to do that at the end of the tourney.
Yes,
but
yeah. Go
ahead.
Oh, well, it's just ever since then I didn't know him for so long, and I think it was a decade later I finally met him. And I don't know if I told him that story. I think we did. I was with Duchess Michelle, and it was after I'd gone a long ways in the society, but just recounting that tale, just obviously he had a much different perspective of it, but I thought it was the best thing, and still to that day, one of the best things I'd ever seen in the SCA.
I love it when the king takes charge like that and says, "This is how the tournament's going to be," and not personal, but this is not what I'm going to stand for. So that's pretty cool. What a way to be introduced. Wow.
It set a good precedent for me personally with the list. You're at their behest.
So did you know when you were young did you understand the whole path to knighthood thing and the whole royalty thing?
So yeah, that's a good question. Did I understand the path? Yeah, I guess yes and no. Yes and no. I didn't really understand. I'm going to be honest. I had some preconceived assumptions about what it was. That first year I started playing, we did every major event we could. We hit probably a dozen events that year, including Estrella, and then it was also 3YC over in Washington, I think.
Yeah.
Or Oregon. I think it was Washington.
It's Washington.
But that was Washington, right? Southern Washington. So that event kind of solidified me in the SCA. Within that year, I'd already rebuilt my whole armor and gone down to leather. And I was doing pretty good because if you fight, 180 times in 360 days, it tends to, stick with you. And that event 3YC, I was sure that my brother was going to get knighted any day. And I thought to me, like, okay, well, then I can be his squire. And that seemed like the path. And we went for 3-4 years after that time, and he didn't get knighted. It was just kind of like odd. And so I didn't really understand what the path of knighthood is. So I went and kind of broke out on my own and like started seeking out knights, and I started, getting some attention. Basil was the first knight to approach me, Duke Basil. And, he interested me in squirehood. I'd never thought about that. I just assumed that, okay, Sam's going to get knighted, then I'm going to squire to him and, do it from there. It was just kind of assumed, I guess, in my brain. And then, having him approach me and ask to be a squire, I was just like, should I? I don't know. That doesn't seem like I'm cheating on Sam, like, but understanding that path to knighthood, like, it was hard for me to kind of grasp, like, this is what I have to do. Like, I want to jump through the hoops. I want to get it. What do I got to do? Is it from the squire? It seems like it'd be easier that way. And I think, I got squired within a few months of that. And
you did squire to Basil?
No, I didn't squire to Basil. I ended up squiring to John L. That's a interesting story there, but it was shortly after my, I think, second crown tournament I fought in. And he had approached me, and I said, yeah, let's do it. And I realized a year later how important it was to have a knight speaking for you in circle, or to have somebody representing you in circle.
How was that made clear to you?
So there was an incident. Let's see if I can go back in my brain what year it was. I don't even think 99. 99, it was at a Griffin's Fury, so we're fighting against Abacal, and at that point in time, they had archers that were considered light fighters on the field, and they had the white helmets with the red arrows on top, and there are no hits, and so we all understood that clearly. And so at a Griffin's Fury, I was, doing my job and chasing down the archer, because I'm the guy with dude with the horse, and there's a heavy fighter that came in the way, so I gave her a big old rap shot and looked for the light, and she was nowhere to be seen, so I just kept moving. And apparently I wrapped her. She was hiding behind the heavy fighter, and I hit her in the head, and she got hurt. And that sucked. I didn't even realize it until like 2 fights later, and they like pulled me off the field. Like, you need to atone for what? What did I do? I don't understand. And so they brought me up in Night Circle that night, and they were going to pull my card. And my knight stood up in Night Circle, and he basically he told me this later, what had happened. I hope it's not breaking circle, but he basically told me kind of the events, like, no, they were going to pull your card, and they did actually pull my card for a few weeks there. But he stood up in circle, and he said, I don't know exactly what he said, but he basically had my back, and he called them out on it. And then they asked him, let's see, that was basically the whole thing of it. And then they asked who the next candidate was, and then my name was the first one on the list, apparently. And he got right back up and started, spouting all the stuff he needs to say about it. And it was then that Basil actually decided to knight me. So, I mean, I guess
so they pulled your card and decided to knight you at the same event.
In the same circle, yeah. I got my card pulled.
That's
and
weird.
I got passed the same circle. Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird.
That's
I guess
weird.
that's kind of the confliction.
Yeah. Well, first, it's a little weird that she didn't actually talk to you, and you guys could have figured out that it was a misunderstanding. But whatever.
There was another guy who was sent out to fight who actually to go hit the lights as well, or to not hit them but kill them, and he actually was hitting them, and they pulled his card too. And I think they just assumed we both were, but.
So they made the decision there. Did you get offered there?
No, it wasn't until the crown tournament, I think a month later, 6 weeks later or something.
Okay. And by then they had given you back your card?
Yeah, and I had atoned. They gave me basically a sentence to do. He made me read through the whole marshallet and then answer some questions on it. And the night marshal happened to be in my barony, so I was able to have that dialogue with him pretty quickly because I was going to practice, twice a week. So we got it sorted out within, I think, a 2-week period, and then I was off to crown tournament.
Well, that makes sense. At least it was like something productive, I guess. Did your brother get knighted before you? Oh, go ahead.
No, that's an interesting story. So he I got offered knighthood at that tournament by Basil, and then I was knighted like 3 weeks later. It was just kind of rushed, but we did it. And then it was at Estrella, and I think Connor was king. And they opened the circle and they started talking about him. And I waited my whole turn. I'm the baby knight, so I didn't really want to say anything. And of course, he's my brother, and I got people on both sides of the fence here. And so I get up and I tell kind of what I told you, my story about how like he rose me, and I expected to be knighted to him, and kind of gave my spiel about him. And in that circle, they decided to knight him. And so he was knighted 6 months after I was.
That's cool. Was it a little weird for you to get knighted before him?
Yes. And it was very weird. I'm not gonna lie. I'd only been playing, I think, just over 4 years at the time, and he had been playing for twice that at least. And so I think it was a bit frustrating for him when he heard I was going to get knighted. He was not like as excited for me as I thought he was going to be. I was like, oh, he wasn't really psyched. I'm like, yeah, I guess that kind of sucks to have your little brother beat you to the goal. But like one of those things kind of realized me at that point in time. I think it was actually at that moment when I realized that he was disappointed about that, is that, there's more to this game than just getting the knighthood, getting that belt. And it's a lot more than that. And the recognition is nice. And I feel like it comes at some detriment sometimes. People are run off because they don't get knighted. And some people will stick around forever just, praying they do get knighted someday. And it's hard to have that be like the one quantifier about this game, that everybody's got to go for. And I don't want to speak bad about the ship, but I get that feeling sometimes. It makes me not sad, but a little disappointed, I guess.
Do you think that the bar is too high, or?
No, I don't think the bar is too high. And I think the bar should be high, but at the same, because it should be challenging, it shouldn't be that, well, you've been playing for 5 years plus or whatever it is, you've been here for 20 years. Yeah, you get knighted, you get your kudos. And that's great, but at the same time, a lot of places do go very, very high on it, or some people just don't, they never get knighted. And do I think the bar is too high? Yeah, yes and no. Some places it is, some places it isn't. A lot of times it's just at the whim of a madman. I've said that to a number of vigil tents. Like, at the end of the day, like you got a couple of people making that decision, and some people can be influenced. Some people are very stoic about their beliefs in the society, and that's awesome to have that differing opinion. I think we should disagree on things. I think the bar should be too high, it should be too low. I think it should be challenging, but it shouldn't be the only thing.
Right. So you got knighted in 99. You were fighting crowns at that time, yeah?
Yeah, I had fought in, I think 3 or 4 crowns.
And was your tournament weapon system sword and shield?
I remember. Yeah, I think we had moved to the pool system at that point in time. No, we hadn't. This was right before we did the pools. I think, honestly, I don't remember that well.
It's okay.
But yeah, whether it was pools or not, it was just open style. And then I remember the last part of it was definitely best 2 out of 3. Yeah.
Was tournament fighting something that you were naturally good at, or did you have to come up with some sort of system for yourself to get your head in the right place?
So to get my head into the fighting game, it was, I used to do the gladiator thing. I would walk out onto the turning field, pick up some dirt, and just kind of walk around on that field, get my footing, and kind of feel what it was like out there. And then I'd also, if it was a big tournament, like the crown tournament, the first one I won, I had started trying practicing in other styles. I did Cali Eskrima stick fighting and Filipino knife fighting. And then I also got a tune in my head. And that tune just kind of, every time you're fighting, you're either listening to the tune while you're practicing, while you're doing pel work, and then you're listening to it while you're actually in the tournament field. And I'm a drummer by heart, so I would find something with a good beat and then constantly be like, step into that beat. And that's kind of how I go into a list. And that helps me calm my nerves, keeps me focused on what I'm doing. Because definitely tournaments can be very high anxiety, but if you're grounded, if you have a rhythm, there's no panic.
So what song was that for you?
Led Zeppelin, Your Time Is Gonna Come on the first one.
Cool. Was there a different one for your second and third crowns?
Yeah, for sure. What was the second one? I think it was I know it was Marvin Gaye. I'm trying to remember which song it was. And then the third one was Tool, 46 and 2. And that one I still kind of stick around with. It might have been Placebo, Nancy Boy. That might have been it.
Okay.
I don't know. There's been like 4 of them that I've used over the years that always get me into that fighting mood.
I think it's interesting that you choose the song and you use it while you're working up for crown, so that you can associate it when you're at the tournament. You're the first person I've heard that actually does that, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I usually actually make a playlist when I'm getting ready, and then a few of them will stick with me, and I'll try to focus on those ones,
So all of the comments are about how great you cook and how great your Turkish coffee is. So I don't want to totally steer away from fighting, but I know by trade, you guys have a restaurant. How does that cross over into the SCA?
So when me and my brother started the household, we would try to find ways to get people to go to the event. And one of those ways was by making the rest of the event pretty easy for them and getting an economic way to get food at the event. And so we both worked at restaurants, so we would just pack up some gear, buy food from our reps, and then so we can get the price way down, so we can get as many people to the event as possible for as cheaply as we can. And then we slowly developed that, and I would try new things. And I love cooking outside. I think I found my passion for cooking outside when I was doing these events. And I still love cooking outside, and so like me and Ian would run kitchens. We were doing that up until last year. I think it was the last kitchen we ran at Estrella. Actually, I didn't run one last year. I was part of one, but I didn't run it. But we would do kitchens for, up to 150 people was our biggest one, I think, in 2001. So it was a pretty large group of people, a big production. We used to have giant tents that we would and bring tables down and stuff like that and make a feast out of it. That was one of the things that we always loved about the SCA was the feasting and that kind of camaraderie, that getting together, gathering at the table. So for my professional career as a chef, that was a big part of it for me.
And so you're talking about you and your brother's household. I know you're part of the Brotherhood, but do you guys have like a separate household that's just Artemisia, or?
That's just Artemisia?
Like, do you have like a separate, I don't know, like, do you have a household in addition to the Brotherhood? Or is it?
Well, I'm part of multiple different brotherhoods. I'm part of the Brotherhood of the Bengal as well. That's primarily, but Outlands as well. And I've been a side member on many other households. We're not like, but the Brotherhood of the Black Unicorn was where kind of we had our roots, and there's still a dozen hardcore members out there that are still out there playing the game and winning crowns and being barons and all that kind of stuff right now. So we're still held together. We got a good showing, but it's not nearly as big as it used to be back in the heyday of the game.
Yeah, that's cool.
But that's really the main I've
So let's talk about the first crown you won. Was that a crown that, well, obviously you had geared up for it and you had picked your song, and tell me how you trained for it.
So I did 3 different things, and it was actually the crown before that was the first crown of Artemisia that I had not bought in since the second one. And I was actually at the first one, and I didn't have my authorization card put together right, and I didn't really know what I was doing. But I was really pissed I couldn't find the first one, even though I showed up. But I found the second one by gun it, and I picked my consort the night before and got it figured out. But by this time, I was pretty good. I had been knighted just a brief while. I think it was about a year or so. And let's see, and I fought in a crown tournament. It was in the October crown, and I didn't fight. I showed up, and somebody won, and it was kind of a big shock, and it was kind of a weird list. There was a lot of disputes over like the validity of it, and, like, did this person not take a shot and that kind of stuff. And frankly, I didn't see anything wrong with the fighting, but I felt bad for the guy who won. I think he's a great guy, and I was like, I got to go fight in the next crown. I can't, I have to be an example out there so that other people will not do that. If you're out there being a good example and fighting your best fight, other people will pick up on that. And I've always believed that. I failed at that many times. People will attest that. But for the most part, I try to hold true to those values. So I had it in my head, like, I got to go win the next crown. I know I can do it. I know everybody who I have to beat in the list. And I had my checklist, and there was 2 guys in particular, like, these guys I got to figure out how to beat. And so I practiced and figured out, did talk to some really good fighters about how to get in close. Like, one guy has really long arms, and I was like, okay, I got to figure out how to get past that defense. So I went and talked to Sean, and he's like, this is what you do. You do this step in when they do that. And I tried it out. I'm like, oh my God, it worked, and then sure enough, I'm fighting that guy in the final round, it's like, and you're like, okay, this is what I've been training for. And you take that first step and you're like, and then you're like, okay, now we're on an even playing field. And it just kind of changed the whole game. But for practicing, like, I did 3 different things. I got part of a dojo, and we were doing Kali Eskrima and Filipino knife fighting. And that was, we were just kind of rustic. We were just trying to figure it out. And we'd kind of go a little excessive, but it was full contact, like everything goes. Like, my instructor choked me out with the stick at one point in time. I'm like, I wish we could do that in the SCA. But that was fun. I remember my future squire, I don't know, she was actually my squire at the time, came and watched me fight in it. She's like, I don't think you're going to lose crown because you're not going to feel a thing. I was like, I'll feel it. The other main thing I did is that I got our group of guys and gals here in Missoula together once a week on Saturday after work. We would go into the parking lot of my dad's restaurant, and we had these big spotlights in the parking lot, and we would basically fight till like 2 a.m. and drink beers and just, get that constant fighting it. And it's really just repetition,
Yeah.
Make sure that you have something down so well that you can't do it wrong,
That's cool. I love when you create the opportunities for yourself and then you share them with other people. I think that's awesome. So tell me about your first reign. Like, was reigning what you thought it was going to be? Were there surprises? Did you have a plan? Did you stick with it?
I did not have a plan. It didn't, everything kind of fell apart before I even stepped up, but we made the best of it. So yeah, that was kind of the, I'm not gonna go into that. Basically, we made a list of all the events we were gonna do, and my squire and his wife, God bless her soul, Thea, we decided that we were gonna do this. The queen was kind of not in the picture. She had moved out and gone down to live in Idaho. And so we basically, the 3 of us did this whole reign ourselves. And we had kind of, like, Thea had probably the most idea of what was going on in the game out of the 3 of us. So she basically set it up, made the contacts, told me where to go, what to say, filled out the forms, and kind of ran it for me. And just told me what to do. And then so I'd show up and do the thing, and it all worked out. And then my squire was there basically breaking down the thrones. And I had a whole team. There wasn't just those 3 of them, but we lived together. And so we were the core, and we went to probably, I think it was a total of 32 events during that reign.
That's a lot.
That's a pretty decent number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, these are events in, like, there's 2 events up in Canada and events all over the place. We went to far west, Ontario, and down to Arizona 2 or 3 times. Like, we were all over the place. We went to every corner of Artemisia and try to hit it there, Yeah, we made a T-shirt. I was just looking at it the other day, and it had a Artemisian Kingdom or World Tour, AS something something, and it had a list, kind of like a concert T-shirt of all the different things we went to that year, and I sold them as a fundraiser for that reign.
I love it.
I still got 2 if anybody's interested.
Yeah, I love it when reigns do that. We've had a couple of reigns do that, and it's just a fun thing that you can give to your retinue for working so hard for you. So yeah.
Sure.
So even though it sort of fell apart before it began, like, you guys made the best of it, and you had a good experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had an amazing experience.
Okay.
Reigning, you're gonna get a few things. You're gonna make a lot of new friends, and you're gonna lose a lot of old friends. And that's something I tell people before they fight in the list. Is like it's just inevitable. As hard as you try, people will expect things of you that you can't deliver, and it's gonna offend them. But at the same time, there's so many genuine people out there who are playing this game that have got your back. That it makes it all worthwhile. And there's a lot of things that are so rewarding that people keep wanting to do this again and again. Those good times, you just focus on those when you're reigning, and it reminds you of how good the game can be. So I've had the best times and the worst times while reigning, to answer your question.
Yeah. So your next reign was in the Outlands, right?
Yes.
Yes. I thought you were going to elaborate. So
I mean, I can. What do you?
Okay. Well, how long were you in the Outlands before you won Crown down there?
Sorry, you cut out for just a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What did you say again?
How long were you in the Outlands before you won Crown?
Ooh, when was that Crown? November. So 10 months.
Okay.
I was actually asked to fight in it too. That was an interesting time in the Outlands. Do you want the long version or the short version? I guess. How much time?
I want the version that you want to give me.
Okay. So when I moved to the Outlands, I was had just come off the reign thing like 2 years earlier. I got done with my reign in 2003. And I decided I got to get out of Missoula. So I left town. I was still pretty young. I was in I think around 25 or so at the time. And my good friend, Duke Conan from the Outlands, was like, why don't you come live with me? I was going to go to culinary school. And he says, come live with me down in Colorado. I'll give you 6 months free rent and to get you through, this first part of college. And I said, great. So I went down, started going to school, and we started fighting all the time. Just a lot. And it was, really good high-end practice. We'd go in his backyard and he'd Pell set up and armory in the basement. And we were kind of at the top of our game, and we started going all over the place to different events together. So that kind of geared me up, to the game. But at the same time, he was retracting. He hadn't been knighted yet, and he was a bit bitter about that. And so he was kind of retracting from the SCA, where I was like, I'm enjoying this aspect of it. I don't really get too into it. And so we would go to a bunch of events and just hit the tourneys. We flew down to Arizona one weekend. We were there for a day and a half and fought in 6 tournaments and won all of them, and then came back. We were just trying to do that as much as possible. It was kind of ridiculous, but that tournament was originally held in October, and Tamiki won. This was another kind of drama crown, where he clearly won, and he was the victor that day. And there was a lot of, I'll let Tamiki tell that story. But anyways, for one way or another, he had to leave the crown on the throne and step down. And I had just won the tournament to be the Shere Khan of the Bengals. So I'm the leader of the household, and we're going to be the King's Guard. And so, and we're all gearing up for this reign, for about 4 weeks, and we're getting ready to go down to a treaty negotiations. And I was asking him okay, do you want me to go down? I have the time, I can get a ticket. He's like, no, don't bother. I'm not Crown Prince anymore. And I was like, what? And so then the next day it's okay, we're going to rehold Crown tournament in a couple weeks. It was 2 weeks. So they gave us 2 week prep time. And so until that point in time, I had no intention of fighting in Crown. And the current king, I had a good friend, my consort Ileana. We sat and talked about it. Do we want to fight in Crown? Is this something we want to do? I could do it. I kind of did the math on it because I'm a math guy. I'm I'll actually save money by winning Crown. So, because I'm going to go to these events anyway. Now the kingdom will pay for part of it.
Right.
Because I'm okay, the math. I'm a poor college student at the time. I'm I can't afford a reign. She's like, no, you can't. Just do the math. And I'm that's not a bad point, And so we're taking these things into consideration while we're talking about this. And we hashed out okay, this is our objectives. What do we want to do if we win Crown? And so we hashed out what our objectives were. Do we have an agenda? What's it going to be? Hashed it all out. And we had less than 2 weeks to prep. And so then we basically built a retinue and started commissioning stuff right off the bat. Because we had like 2 weeks to fight in the crown, and then 2 weeks later was coronation.
Wow.
Because of the way it had staggered off, and I don't really know their calendar that well. So then we brought it up to the king, and he actually asked me, he's like, yeah, I'd love for you to fight in crown. That'd be awesome if you could. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And fought, and like every list, you got your boogeymen, but you keep that song going in your head, and eventually you meet them in the final round, and you figure out a way to beat that super fast lefty, and boom, you got it.
So did you guys end up doing what you had planned for that reign?
To say the least, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yes, there was a number of things. The first one, we wanted to make sure that Conan got knighted, and he had actually gotten knighted the reign before. But the second one is we both had agreed that we wanted to knight Lycurgus. And that was a big point of contention in the Outlands. We had people from both sides of the fence. I had been going to circles in Outlands for at least 3 years at this point in time. And people were split, like right down the middle. It was ugly. In every circle, it was at least half-hour discussion about this. And then finally, the king before me says, we're not talking about this anymore. Someone's just going to do it one day. And everybody agreed. And I said, okay, well, I'm that guy. I'm that someday. And that someday's going to happen before the end of my reign. Unfortunately, he was in the military up until like a couple weeks before my reign ended. He was off in, I think, Kuwait at the time on a base. So he got back, and the end of my reign was really sloppy. Like I said, I was in college. I needed to do an internship. So halfway through the reign, I basically moved to New York and started living in a small apartment there. And I had it planned out fairly well, because I got to come back for my graduation. Coronation's the week after. So I got about a week time to, get my graduation stuff in order, graduate, and then I was actually going to be moving up to New York to accept a job out there. So we had a very narrow window. I got to have one sit down with Lycurgus, and I sat down and I had a long conversation about him. And I said, okay, well, my coronation stepping down, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think about that really hard between now and then. And that was the biggest. There was a lot of mistakes I made between then and there, but I wasn't around enough. And I think that's the biggest fault I made. But long story short, I got to coronation, and I ended up knighting him at the very last act. And not to get too much into details, I didn't do a few things. The biggest thing is I didn't really consult the circle about it. But at the same time, the previous king had said, well, we're not going to talk about it anymore. Someone's just going to do it one day. And so I didn't really think about it too much. Like, okay, well, they're all either expecting it or they're not. One way or another, it's going to happen. And the Crown Prince Hogarden, he was on board with it too. He's like, yeah, let's do it. He wasn't really as privy into the details of it, but there's a few mistakes we made in the ceremony, not consulting the knights. I should have called the circle that morning. Long story short, a lot of people were upset about it. We pissed off half the people irrevocably. And since then, I've made peace with all those people. And I don't have any enemies in the SCA. I'm pretty sure about that. But it irked a few people, and they went to the board, and just like they had done with Tamiki before, and they pushed the buttons and the levers, and gave me a 5-year sanction at the whole end of the thing because of that. And I actually still to this day not entirely sure why they gave me the sanction. They never told me. That was.
So how do you?
Yeah, it was interesting.
I was just going to ask, how do you come back from something like that? Like, getting sanctioned like that, and then, still putting so much energy into your household and into cooking for people, and, reigning again, because you reign again in Artemisia in 2015, right?
Yeah. So, it burnt a lot. It was funny. I moved to New York. I actually moved to New York with Tamiki, and we lived together. And so we were commiserating about it, but I actually didn't find out I was sanctioned until my boss pulled me into his office, and he was like, what's this all about? I just Googled your name, and this is the first thing that popped up. And I was like, I don't know, what is it? And I'm like, oh, I've been sanctioned from this game I've been playing forever for breaking a tradition. Like I never got a call, I never a letter. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so I had very hurt feelings, and the crown out there had invited me over to fight in their list, and I was like, no, I absolutely can't do it. That's a good way to get R&D'd. There's a lot of people that argued about that point, of what I should do and anything. And I said, no, I'm not going to do anything about it. I obviously offended people, and this is my penance. I knew I was going to get some backlash, and this is it. So serve my time and move on. So I waited that good 5 years until I really started playing again. And I remember this was probably the crux of my SCA career. I'd moved back to Montana, and I was like, I'm going to start playing again. I got into the old household, and started revitalizing it, showing up, and I was allowed to fight in tournaments, but I didn't want to compete in tournaments, in crown tournaments. And so I went out and fought in one as a buy fighter, because that's my duty as a knight, to show up. And apparently my authorization was good, but my membership had expired. So technically, I'm not authorized if I'm not a member. And so my card got pulled again for the second time in my life. And it was right after I just gotten back in. I'm like, all right, I'm going to get back in, start playing again. And then they're like, pull this card, can't fight anymore. And I'm just like, at that point in time, I was like, I'm done. I'm out of this game. Like, they obviously don't want me here. And I had mentioned that somewhere. And like Kyrgyz called me up. He says, you can't quit the SCA. And I said, well, why not? He says, because hanging out with me is a fucking good time. And I was like, shit, he's right. And so he kind of just pulled me, all right, I'll stay. And, so I just let it roll off me. I served my time, another year of no fight club. And, but, it got back into it. And I still, and then like 5 years later, I wound up fighting in Crown again. That's another story, I guess. But
Wow.
Yeah, that's how I got back in. He's kind of pulled me back in by the promise of a good time.
So when you got your card pulled the second time, the sanction that came with it is you couldn't fight for a year. Is that?
It was not fighting official tournaments.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And like her just talked you back into
I
it.
don't even remember what.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 2 sentences, and he talked me back into it. I was like, all right, fine, I'll stay. But I was getting ready to offload all my gear and stuff. I was like, I'm done.
Well, I mean, I that just seems a little arbitrary. I mean, obviously, I wasn't there, but it does seem a little arbitrary, especially since you were the buy fighter.
Yeah, I thought so too. But
yeah.
That merciless thought that was a good way to teach me a lesson. So who might argue?
If you weren't allowed to fight in tourneys, were you still practicing during that time? Because you love to fight, and you have this fighting household, right?
Yes. Let's see. I don't even remember what year that was. I want to say it was 2010, something like that. 2009. That's right. Because I was living in that studio apartment. 2009, I got my card pulled. 2010, I just jumped back into it. I missed a few Estrellas back then. That was kind of my quantifier of if I was playing in the game or not, is if I went to Estrella. So, but it didn't deter me that much, because he was right. I went back and started fighting again, and it's the same reason I keep coming back to this game again and again. Is just the energy you get out there when you're on the field. And again, I'm more of a melee guy, but the tournaments were just as thrilling. Like won an Outlands prize tournament, and that was an ugly tournament. I'm very not proud of that tournament because I definitely rhinoed my way through it. But I was so mad at the time, I felt justified. So every now and then people congratulate me for that. I'm like, no, that's not something I would.
I'm not proud of that one.
I'm not proud of that list. No. I fought another list I'm much more proud of. That was a low time for me, to say the least.
Okay. So tell me what motivated you to go for Crown again in Artemisia.
Okay, let me think about that motivation. I got it. So this is fast forwarding to, 2011 was the next time I actually competed in a list, and I fought against Sean in the final round. And Sean gave me one of the best compliments I've ever had. He says, that was the hardest round I've ever fought in Crown Tournament. And I was like, well, I'm glad I gave you a good fight. I had a good time doing it. And, looking back, I'm really glad I didn't win. I just started dating a new girlfriend at the time, and she had just showed up, and she was an opera singer. So she was coming from her rehearsal, drove down to Boise, and basically missed the final round. Got there right after they were breaking down the tourney field. I'm like, I'm glad I didn't win this, because that would have been really awkward to this poor girl who didn't even see what happened. I'm like, hey, now you're queen, like,
yeah. Welcome.
Probably a wise choice. Yeah. It was good, but you don't think about that when you're on the tourney field. I've never been able to throw tourneys easily, just because I get in that mindset. I don't want to fail at this, like, not failing, but like, this is a game and I love winning games, and it's strategy, it's how to beat your opponent. So
right.
That made me decide that, yes, I want to fight and win in Crown again. I want to do this at least one more time. So I've always kind of had that in the back of my head. And then 2015 rolled around, and it was 2014. It was right when Morgan first won his first crown, and I went to an event. The king had asked me at an uprising to be his general at this new event, Talon Crescent War. And so I said, you got it. I'll do what I got to do. It's a good nightly job. You want me to be general? I'll absolutely be general. So we went down to this event, and the fighting was great, but it missed out on the whole scene afterwards. Everybody kind of went to Vegas and hung out on the strip and did their thing. And I'm not much of a Vegas guy. I came down to do SCA. And there was just like nobody left. There was no fires. It was dark. My shield got stolen by some hoodlums from North Vegas. It was just kind of a weird event, like, and so like I was like, like I wanted this to be cool because it's a great locale. It's got lots of room for growth, but the lack of participation by the local group, I think, was just kind of a big turnoff. And then 2 weeks later, I went to Estrella War, and I was one of 4 Artemisians there. And I was like, wow, we used to show up with hundreds of people to this war, and it was this big thing. And the event was just so much fun. I was like, there's almost over 3,000 people at this thing, and like the fighting's great. It's got everything you want out of an SCA event. There's awesome tournaments, the Merchants Row, party until 5 o'clock in the morning if you want. I was like, this is what I need, and I need to get Artemisia back to this war. I want this back. I want to have the big household again with 100 plus people, getting people to war. And so me and my brother were both there. We were like the 2 out of the 6 Artemisians that showed up that year, and we said, next year we're coming back and we're bringing everybody. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to go win Crown then, because that's a good way to get people to show up. And then I had an agenda. I had a few things I wanted to do. I think Floki down in Salt Lake, Loch Salon, had this great idea to do 5-man melee tournaments as a list for one of the uprising things. And so my game mind turned on. I built all these rules, like 10 pages of rules to do this battle of 5 thing. And then we tried it out. It was a great time. I was like, I want to promote this all over the game. And if we could build this network of like, all right, this is my barony, and I got my 10 guys. I'm going to drive to Estrella, and we're going to compete in this big list, like a sports team,
Right.
Fly the colors, get the heralds out there, and make it kind of a fun inter-kingdom competition, And so I try to kind of promote that, but I'm not really good at organizing people or tournaments, so it kind of failed. But
you guys brought that over to like Border War or Honor War, didn't you? Like I remember one of those had something like that.
Honor Wars most years. Yeah, I think it was probably at an Honor War that you got to see that at. An Honor War is one of those events that I've gone to, I think, 20 times. So that was a great testing ground for it, And I tried to videotape it, but I'm not much of a cameraman. But try to make it into kind of an event, and like have stats, and like, oh, you got so and so skills, and the whole idea was to get these younger fighters into the group and to give them a team to be on, and to get them out there, build them the armor, like. And kind of one of the things I had written into the idea, the concept of it, was that the baronies would sponsor these people. Like, hey, we got a young hot fighter coming out of college, but he can't really afford armor. Let's sponsor. Let's get him into armor. Let's send him to these tournaments, and he can start getting points for us. I thought that'd be a kind of cool way to get people into the SCA, but
Yeah, I think it would be
it
cool.
might still be. Maybe somebody listening to this will start that up.
We've tried that a little bit in
I thought it'd
Ontario.
be a cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're fun. Every time you do one, people are like, "This is awesome!" You know, they have a great time doing it. And I think it's a great mix of trying to get the tourney and the melee together and make it something. And we would make the field real small and do it in the town squares, so it's real tight fighting, you know.
I think something really cool about,
funky.
I was gonna say, I think something really cool about that too is a lot of times people feel lost in melee, like they don't have a place. And if you have like teams like that, when you go to an Estrella or, you know, a Great Western War, you have your team as part of your kingdom, right? So you have a place, or I don't know.
You're absolutely right. So when we did the Battle of Five at Estrella that first year, the Swedes came and they had a 10-man unit, and watching them fight, they ended up winning the whole thing easily. Not easily. The Lands Collect down there, and Aidenfeld gave them a good run for their money, but they were so like well tuned and organized. Like you could tell that these guys trained for this kind of stuff, and they would give commands, and like the front line would swap out with the back line. And they were subbing people all the time, and like they just dominated the field in that tournament style. And it was like, that's awesome. Like that's exactly the kind of thing you want to see in this kind of a scenario. So it had some successes for sure, but
Were you able as king to you know, get Artemisia to go back to Estrella?
yeah. So we ended up going back. We're still going back to that war, although the last 2 years have been undesirable. But we ended up showing up. I think we ended up having about we had about 100 people in our kitchen. I know that, and I ended up cooking while I was crowned. That was kind of fun. But we had about I think 150 to 180 people from Artemisia come down for that war that year. So I'd say that was a success. And the year after, Lachlan was king, and he brought a huge host with him, and we did the kitchen again. And you know, it's a good way to get everybody there. You can pack a lot lighter if you don't have to pack cooking stuff. So, and then about after that next year, we started having some issues, trailer issues, and the wars got weird, and so we kind of stopped doing the kitchen as much. But it's something I've been thinking about for quite a bit, about how to bring that back, and it's kind of an important part of the game for me. I love doing it. It gives me a sense of purpose while I'm at that event. Like, this is how I contribute. This is my, and like this last Estrella, I went down. I was graciously hosted by Sino Nomine in Aidenfeld, and it was a lot of times where I'm like, I don't have anything to do. I guess I'll just hang out and drink, or something, or go get a pickup fight in. I'm like, I'm not used to that at Estrella. I'm used to like, okay, it's 4 o'clock. You sort of got to get this stuff done. You got a time frame for that, and you're hustling, and it's fun. I love the energy, But it was kind of fun to relax for a little bit, for sure. But I did miss that energy. I missed that contribution, giving back somehow. Everybody's got to do it in their own way, but that's my way.
I find it amazing that you were able to run a kitchen and be king at the same time. That's pretty phenomenal.
That's all about organization.
What?
It's all about organization.
Okay.
Running a kitchen is easy. Well, I mean, if you've done it enough, like it was a bit challenging, at times, but the most challenging night was doing the court. We did court in our Kingdom Pavilion. And so, I had to make sure I had dinner done before court. And that's always the thing I like to slack off on when don't have to be in court. I'm like, you get dinner and it's probably going to come up right when court happens. So if you're not here, we'll save some for you. Or you usually try to get out of beforehand. But that was a little bit tricky, trying to get court done and dinner done at the same time.
Well, I find it challenging just fighting all day and feeding myself. So being king, fighting, and feeding 100 people, I'm in awe. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's the thing. We had a volunteer group.
Yeah. So we've been talking almost an hour. Is there anything that I haven't touched on that you would like to talk about?
Well, I mean, we could talk about the revolution a little bit if you're interested.
Sure.
Not really. It's a revolution. I'm gonna say that one time. But Just so everyone's clear, the revolution will not be on Facebook. Okay. It's code.
Okay. I'm like, I don't know.
Whistle. Shh.
Hey, did you bring a sword? I don't know if I reminded you to bring a sword.
What? Sword?
Did you
What kind of sword?
like a rattan sword to look at, like how you put it together?
Oh.
No.
Let me think real quick. Yeah, I can get one real quick.
You don't have to. Do you do anything special to your sword?
I actually, after when did I change? I don't remember when I changed. I think it was shortly. It was sometime during my break. I changed to open pommel sword, or so no basket hilt, and just using a gauntlet. And that was the biggest change for me in sword fighting. It took me a long time to adjust to that. So it's, basic cross guard and a ball at the end that you can grab onto, round disc. And I go 39 inches with tip, so 38 cut. And it's pretty light sword. I shave it down like you guys do on tier, but I usually don't go as wide. Oil the shit out of it. Just kidding. And then what do we put on the edge? I don't even remember. I haven't made a sword in a while. But yeah, it's strapping tape and then athletic tape, more or less. I did a checky pattern last time. That was fun trying to figure that out.
What for you was the hardest part about changing from a basket hilt to just keons and a gauntlet?
Not blocking with my hand. Forced me to block with the sword a bit. Because you can block with your gauntlet, but it stings,
Right.
So and before I was punching those blocks, and it's a lot easier to punch a block, and now I got to get the sword down there to actually do a real block, because you don't want your hand to get hit. So that was a change for sure. And it was at that time too I started going with a smaller shield, and now I'm just down to a buckler. I got like a little 12-inch dinner plate. Is my turning style. And so that right there, and I did that primarily because I was changing my kit around, but I wanted everything to be versatile, and I wanted to be able to be on the melee field and still use a sword. And that was the biggest reason why I switched that up. That was an important part of how I wanted to play the game, I guess. I wanted to fight. And it's like, if I got to do it on the melee field, I got to be good at it in the tourney field. So I started doing the tournaments like that too. So, but it's a lot different maneuvering that basket hilt around than a gauntleted hand.
Did it take you some time to find a gauntlet that gave you the proper range of motion to use a one-handed sword?
It really did. I was originally using a finger gauntlet, and I swear I messed my hands up pretty good. Actually, I just got back from my carpal tunnel surgery like a week ago. So hopefully I'll be fighting again soon, if we can fight again. The fingered gauntlet made my hands spread out too much when gripping the sword, and so it really messed with my hand grip. And so I switched to a leather gauntlet. It had some kydex in there, so it was actually more protective than most of the steel gauntlets I used. And it felt like a basket hilt. I could punch with it and not get my hand too beat up, but it did sting, obviously, more than a basket hilt would sting. So it was a good lesson, and it took a while to get the range of motion back. The leather gauntlet was much less articulated than the steel one was, so it didn't have as big of a range of motion, but
it lets you move around
and make it work.
You can move your hand around inside it.
Yeah, so what I ended up doing is I left my trigger open.
Okay.
So I had my thumb attached to the thumb part, and then I left this finger floating. And then these three were strapped in. So I could grip onto that sword and still use that trigger, because I fight with a trigger. And the trigger helps generate power, get the sword moving in the right direction. It's going to be more congruent with your hand and rely less on the grip you have on the sword. So I thought the trigger, I think that was actually the key in order to use the sword like that, was getting that trigger installed.
All right, well, let's do the final 10 then. First one, what event have you never gone to that you would like to go to?
Go for it.
Gulf Wars? Me too.
Go for sure.
Yeah. If you could fight anyone in the, well, go ahead. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, I'd love to go to that. Go for. So.
If you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
Like Kyrgyz. I only fought him once.
What is your favorite Estrella story?
I wasn't prepared for that one. Most of them are not designed for like.
They're not safe for. That's fine. We can pass. You don't have to.
Let me go back to that. Let me think about that for a minute.
Okay. Who are your favorite people to watch fight?
Who are my favorite people to watch fight? You know, I had the video of Tamiki fighting in that Crown List he won in 2005, and I think I watched that thing like 100 times. Like watching him dance around people was just amazing.
The way he can get his body to move.
It's like, holy cow. Yeah. Loved watching him fight.
Yeah. I love Tamiki. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Do you have a hero or inspiration in the SCA, and if so, who is it?
Hero. So many heroes out there. Basil's always been one of my heroes, and not just because he knighted me, but I love the way that he played the game, just the way he did it. Some of the old guys I had growing up, but Tamiki's definitely one of those heroes, I would say. Like Kyrgyz was. My brother's squire, his name was Eli Silveroak. He was a hero of mine. He just had such a neat way of enjoying the game and including everybody. Didn't matter if you were like the dregs of society or some highfalutin lawyer, he'd treat you the same. And you know, having that as kind of like an easy way to go through life is to treat everybody as equals. It's a lot easier to get along with people. You know, that was an example to me. I think Conan's always been one of my heroes. He's one of my best friends to this day still, but I always loved his kind of take on how to do things and what's right and wrong within the society, and how to he kind of pointed me in a lot of stuff. He had done so much research on being knighted when he was a duke and unbelted. We took a road trip together, and he started talking to me about all these old historical texts and virtues and yada yada yada. And I was like, you know so much more about this than I do, and I'm the one who's a knight here. Like, I don't understand what's going on. Yeah. You know, I remember. Hold on a second. I can't remember his name. I'm having a brain lapse. But he was the guy who taught me how to beat Sean. And everybody knows. I'm assuming Sean's on tonight, but
probably.
You know, I went to when I was right after I'd gotten squired, I went to a little event with my girlfriend at the time, or wife at the time, I think. And we were out there fighting. Everybody had left, and it was just me and Sean left over. And we're like, we still want to fight, and so we just hung out together and started fighting. And Sagan, thank you. And Sagan basically sat there and for an hour and a half taught me how to beat Sean. And Sean just stood there and let me do it, and you know, gave me his advice and stuff. And it was the best hour and a half of fighting I think I ever had. And you can tell you're gaining experience points as you're fighting. You're like, holy shit, this is working. You know, like I think that hour and a half I spent with Sagan was probably the most influential hour and a half I had in my entire fighting career.
He is an amazing trainer, just amazing.
Oh, yeah.
If you had to recommend one, if you had to recommend one event in your kingdom for someone out of kingdom to come to, what would it be?
God, there used to be a lot. I haven't been to events in my kingdom in a long time. Shit. Uprising used to be the shit, but it kind of fell apart a number of years ago. Harvest War is pretty cool, but I haven't been to Harvest War in like a decade because it's always during my wedding season. Me and my brother used to host an event called Hell's Gate Tourney up here in Missoula. I would say that would have been the best event to go to, but I was a little biased.
That's okay.
And then Whipping Winds. Whipping Winds is a battle between kind of Artemisia, mostly northern Artemisia, and Avicall. And when I was growing up, my favorite event was called Griffin's Fury. That was a war between Avicall and Artemisia. The Griffins, obviously, they both have Griffins on their device, so is the Griffin's Fury. And that war was just the funnest. And that was the event where I, got my card pulled the first time. It was all fun. But it's all good. But playing with those guys, they had a different system, different style of fighting, but they had a great time nonetheless, just like everybody else there. I miss the camaraderie I had with those guys, and then also the events I did over in Ontario at Border Wars and Honor Wars. That really drug me into the SCA when I was young, and it kept me here for as long as I've been here. Is having those cross kingdom little bouts, let's go across the border and make a raid,
Yeah.
Beat them up. So Whipping Winds up in Northern Artemisia does that still.
Yeah, Avicall is so much fun to play with. They have such a great spirit.
Yeah.
So people in the comments are saying that you should talk about for Estrella some pirate party and your G&Ts. Like, apparently you make the best gin and tonics ever.
Yes.
I don't know.
Just the trick is, so the pirate parties, which pirate party are they referring to? What did they say?
She just says pirate party. I don't know.
Okay. So I found out like probably 4 or 5 pirate parties, but one of the things that me and my brother love doing is creating an atmosphere, and so we would try to incorporate as many different things into a concept party as you can. So there's got to be fighting, there's got to be games, there's got to be challenges, different challenges, and so working that into a party like that is just a hoot. And so you got the big torches going on. Most people kind of know what goes on with these things, but it's just shenanigans. And we basically made a clue game. I'm going to talk about a clue game. Pirate parties are fun, but the clue game was just a hoot. And we took all the crowns that had just showed up and gave them all a little quest to do, and they had to go find out this, and they had to compete in heavy tournaments, rapier tournaments, and games, and all sorts of challenges, and to try to get the clues. And it was entertaining. I enjoy that kind of fun stuff. And then the gin and tonics. So every year I have some good friends down there. Maniko, I love you, drinking your mug. But she usually gets me about 5 or 6 cases of the best grapefruit and Meyer lemons you can get. And so I drink just grapefruit and gin and just a splash of tonic. And that to me is like money gin and tonic. And we actually, at the restaurant I'm working at now, we came up with a Spanish G&T. And so we take some decent gin and we infuse it with a little bit of spices. We got some star anise and coriander and cinnamon and some juniper, and steep that in the gin for a little bit. And then we make up a little bit of fresh squeezed grapefruit, splash of tonic, a little bit of lime, and oh my gosh, it's so good. I could drink these all day long. At Estrella, I'm sitting at this table just squeezing grapefruit all day, making gin and tonic.
Wow. Those sound delicious. What book do you think everyone on the path to knighthood should read? If you're not a book person, you can say a movie.
No, I'm very much a book person.
Okay.
I'm just trying to decide. Check out the book Byzantium. I can't remember who wrote it. I think I got a copy over there. Stephen Lawhead, I think his name is. Byzantium. It's a journey of an Irish monk who gets captured by Vikings and goes on escapades down to Constantinople or Byzantium. And it doesn't really have anything to do with knighthood per se, but it's this journey and this coming around and finding a balance between different sides of a conflict, whether they be good or evil. That's really not the issue. It's whether how well you comport yourself in the situation you're given. That to me spoke a lot and kind of it gave you a good sense of purpose and place. What am I contributing to this? How do I comport myself in these adverse situations? I think it's that adversity that I think we miss so much in the SCA. I think that's it struggles to maintain its interest, I guess, at that point in time. And that conflict, that diversity conflict is such an important part of how we operate as a society, that when we eliminate one side of that conflict, there's no balance, and things can get skewed very easily and become unenjoyable for a large section of people. So trying to find a way to be more inclusive within that. And I think that's what the book kind of taught me, I guess, in a way. Doesn't really have much to do with knighthood per se, but
No,
kind of your sense of place.
I think that has a lot to do with knighthood. So I'm going to look it up. That sounds like a good one. So if you could change one thing about the SCA, what would it be?
Who's watching this again? I'm just kidding. I think that we should change the way that we have our not our crown tournaments, but the way that the kingdoms operate. I think it's so often you can get like I know that I'm not a good administrator. I have no right administrating a group, any amount of people like that. I'm good at running a kitchen, but that's where my skill set usually ends. And it's very much different. Finding a way to be as inclusive as you can within the society, I think, is hard to do. And we should have people, I think, trained on the board level to be able to manage that instead of volunteers. I think we should have paid positions within our society. I mean, we pay enough as members. We could easily afford to have a few salaried people up there, actually keeping this organization alive and well, instead of relying on people's goodwill, as we've done. And granted, goodwill's gotten us a long ways, but I think having professionals in operation of this dream that we have, and so we can play it and still become kings and queens and have our game. I mean, that's the goal. I think if we can figure out a balance there, I think that would be a wise way to go with the society. I think it might keep it alive longer than it can under the current system. But
cool, that's interesting. What is your favorite in-kingdom tradition?
There's some traditions that I think were passed down that others were not kept. I liked the traditions we created the most, I think. And some of them, again, were kept and some of them were discarded. But I always tried to find a different way to do things, something to make it more interesting, to include more people. One of the things that I think my brother started, no, it was Floki actually started it. Artemisia, and granted, I think Ontier's been doing this forever, but it was the collar of steel when someone gets knighted, where all the knights show up with their sword and lay it on their shoulder, and claim out, I, Duke so and so, pronounce you knight, and that weight of that and that power behind that, I think, is so impressive. I wish I'd see that more often.
It is super powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that, that brings me to tears sometimes when I think about that. Like I think the one in particular that brings me to most is when we knighted my brother's squire Eli. It was about 2 months before he died, but the weight of that, and we all knew he was gonna die. It was actually at that crown tournament I fought Sean in, and we brought it up, and it's like, hey, we want to knight this guy. I'm like, oh yeah, well, what about if we do it Estrella? And Hawk, God bless him, got up and said, he doesn't have till Estrella. He's gonna be dead within a month or two. He had a very terminal case of cancer. And so the king's like, all right, well, let's do it in 2 weeks. Can we make that happen? And me and my brother were like, hell yes, we can make that happen. So we threw a huge party, roasted a goat, had all sorts of fun stuff going on. The whole kingdom showed up. It was hundreds of people in this guy's backyard having a party. And that collar of steel, we had people from 4 different kingdoms there that showed up to this thing. And that collar of steel, I still got a picture of it somewhere. The weight of that was, shakes you to your core.
It's super powerful. If nobody's ever seen it before, request it for your own knighting because it's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So last question. What do you think is the most important trait to become a successful fighter?
I got two things actually. This is every fighter that I've trained, I've probably told this to them at one point in time, or 50. There's two rules of fighting. First rule is hit your opponent hard. It seems kind of like simplistic, but if you hit your opponent hard as you can, then there's no question as to the validity of the shot. If they don't want to get hit that hard, fine, don't hit them that hard. But every shot you throw should be a killing shot. So hit your opponent hard. If he doesn't absolutely think that shot is, he stops and thinks like, then you immediately say, no good. Absolutely not. Hit your opponent hard. And the second rule is don't get hit. You do those two things and you'll win every fight.
Easier said than done, but yes. Yes.
It's a basic principle. It's funny if you want me to say one thing that you can do, but those two things, you'll win every fight, guaranteed. If you follow those two rules. I had one more thing actually. I was just reminded. Hopefully this isn't going too long. I was in on tier. What's the big tournament you have? Ursulmus.
You were at Ursulmus. I remember that. You fought very well.
Yeah, that was a fun day. I'm talking about the first one I went to, and I got all the way to the final round. And I was, feeling hot, doing the thing, and I started fighting Skaggy, and right off the bat, I think we both won one, and then he won one. I don't remember how that went, but I remember the last part of it, the third fight. He hit me in the leg, and I went down. I'm like, oh, he's got it. And he instantly says, he instantly went down to his knees. I'm like, this is the final round. This is the third fight of the final round. You don't give up an advantage like that. And at first I was like, am I insulted? Is he like bringing it down? But no, he was very genuine about it, incredibly genuine about it. And I don't know if he was just trying to throw the tournament or what he was doing, but it didn't seem like it to me. And I ended up being victorious then. And it kind of changed my mindset in a tournament about how to comport yourself. And that advantages shouldn't be kept, in my opinion. And since that day, I've never kept an advantage, even in practice. It kind of just clicked something. And, a lot of people I find were actually kind of offended about it, especially when I did it in the final round of Crown. They're like, what are you doing? You can't go to your knees. I'm like, no, I can, and I am. I'm not keeping an advantage I have over my opponent. We're going to keep on the same level. And it's just a different mindset about fighting. So he's definitely on the top of my hero list. I just wanted to add one more onto that list.
Yeah, we do that a lot in our kingdom. I think it's about making the fight more fun to watch and to I don't know, and keeping the chivalric nature of the fight where you want to win, where everyone's at their best, I think. And it's kind of I think a cool thing. It doesn't always work across kingdoms, but yeah. Well, go ahead.
Oh, that was the biggest thing I think I took away from that whole day, was that action he did. And it was surprising and shocking to me. Maybe it's not shocking for, obviously, you get to see it more often, but people don't do that in a lot of other places. And it was just surprising, and it was genuine, genuine felt.
I think it's always a little surprising in the final, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Your Grace, for joining me and for talking to us and being so candid about your ups and downs and coming back and getting, remotivated.
Yeah, I love this game. I'll still be here. I am planning out a new thing to do for Estrella next November, because that's at a great time. By the way, if anybody's watching Keep Estrella in November, I'm all thumbs about that one. That's great. But I want to try to get on Merchants Row and do something there, and do a kitchen at a Merchants Row that you can buy in on. So
very cool.
Later on that, we'll see.
Very cool. So. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And Wednesday, my sister and I are talking to Viscountess Gwyn from the East, which will be very, very interesting. So tune in for that. Thanks. See you later.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.